So,
Yeah, I'll get started while you're
yeah.
bringing up your answer to my question. Yeah, so the question we posed this week was to do with a business policy. So if I'm just trying to implement a business policy where between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. I want um, everyone or almost everyone to be locked out of our system so that they're only working through the normal working hours unless they happen to be working overtime, approved overtime or something like that. So I asked Andrew to come up with a solution to help us implement that policy.
Well, thanks, Bill. So, as most system admins probably know, this was inbuilt into the normal Active Directory in Windows Server, where you could specify a user and actually select with a bit of a GUI interface which hours that the user was allowed to access the company servers. Unfortunately, with Azure Active Directory, this is no longer available to the system admins. So what we've created is using a few different tools, as in Microsoft Forms, SharePoint lists, conditional access rules, some security groups. We've set it up that managers can add a user using a Microsoft form, which then will put that user into a list, and that list can be scheduled to be added to a security group, and that security group is used by conditional access to administer when a user can and cannot log into the system tenant or the Microsoft platform as we speak. So now one of the things to try and bring everything together and make it easier for the manager and system admins is that we've created all of this within Microsoft Teams. So rather than having to go, know what the form link is or what the SharePoint address site is, they can simply go into their Microsoft Teams, as you can see here on the screen, and within the team and the channels, you can see that I've created the forms, created the SharePoint list, and even there's nothing in the SharePoint list at the moment, and even I created a separate channel for admins where you can see the Power Automate flows. So even the system admin doesn't have to sort of, go to powerautomate.microsoft.com. You can simply get there in Teams. So let's begin on how we started this. Now, we tried to make it simple for the manager, where he can just go to the add user form. So basically, we want to add the user to a list, and to do this, we're simply asking for the user's first name, last name, and email address. The main detail on this is more the email address, because that is what is used, basically what they call the UPN. That is used in the security settings to identify the user. So I'm just filling in some details here with first name, last name, and the email address. And of course, the manager can do this and add the person to the list without actually having any administration access to the Microsoft tenant. So here I've put in Diego's details, and I've pressed the submit button, and it's thanks me for my response. And now if I come across to that SharePoint list that I was showing before, you will notice that Diego has been added to the list. Now this was done by a Power Automate flow, which over in my system admin area over
Okay,
here.
Andrew, so the reason a manager can do this is because he's only adding something to a SharePoint list, right? And he just needs the appropriate access to to use the form and run the flow.
100%. And the form is just basically for ease of user access. I mean, potentially, if they felt comfortable with it, they could come over to the SharePoint list here and just enter enter the details straight into the SharePoint list as I am here. It all has the same effect. We were just basically trying to make that interface nicer for the end user.
And I guess when you're first starting up, you could do a bulk load into the SharePoint list.
100%.
as
Create
well. Yeah.
create a CSV file, you know, if you had a whole heap of users, and import them straight in. I'm just going to delete that user. So here we have Diego in our SharePoint list, and I'll just go back to the Power Automate over here. And once again, you can see within the team, you can see all of the different flows that I've created. And the first flow here, add the user to the system access user list. It's a really simple flow. It basically just grabs the information from the form and creates the item straight into the SharePoint list. If anybody out there wants more detail on any of these flows, just please, once again, you know, ask us in the community group. We're more than happy to sort of spend a bit of extra time running through them. And yeah, and we can go through there. And once again, there's also, you know, as you can see here, a second form to remove the user. Exactly the same information: first name, last name, email, and once again, a flow there. Flow here simply to take the user out. Number 2, delete the user. Very similar to the add, except one thing you do have to note is when you're deleting an item, you actually have to get the item first before you can delete it. So there is that little extra step there on the Power Automate. So now once we have a user in our list, at a particular point in time, we want to add that to our security group and remove them from the security group. So let's firstly go have a look here. And as you can see, I've already got it open, but I've opened up the Azure Active Directory, which you can do directly from portal.office.com. And I'm just going to go back a step so you can sort of see where. So within our Azure Active Directory, you can see all of the details: users, groups, identities. Within the groups, I created a new group. It was I defined it as a security group here. And very important to know when creating the flow is the object ID, but that's more on a technical point of view. And then at the moment, you can see members, owners, and if I click on members, there's no members there. So what we've done is, if I go back into Teams and back over to our flows, we've automated here at 7 a.m. we want to remove everybody from the group. Now, the reason we want to remove the people from the group is that when they are in the group, they're blocked. So anybody in the group is blocked from logging in. If nobody's in the group, nobody's blocked. So at the moment, nobody's in the group, nobody's blocked from logging into the tenant. So at 6 p.m., everybody that's in the group, everybody that's in the SharePoint list is added to the security group. And by adding them to the security group, they are then blocked from logging into the tenant. And then at 7 a.m., when we want the users to come back in, let's remove them out of the group, and they can all log in. So let's have a quick look at the add. I've probably sort of got these two around the wrong way because you would be adding them too. So let's have a quick look at what this does. So it picks up each item in our SharePoint list, simply gets the user profile of each user. So you can see that this is in a loop looping through each user within the in the list, and it adds it to the group. Once again, very, very 4-step, simple, basic Power Automate flow.
Andrew, and that's where that technical piece of information is required, the group ID.
Correct, exactly
Yeah.
right there. That group ID right there is that group ID I mentioned earlier. And this ID is picked up from here using the email address from the SharePoint list. That's the most important bit of information that we receive. The first name and last name is just basically so it makes the list easier to look at on an administration point of view.
It's because your email address in your Microsoft 365 is actually the key to being your user login or your staff's login. So everything's centered around it. And without it, you can't do anything else like add it to all the bits and pieces in the behind the scenes admin that managers just don't see.
100%, 100%. So now let me just go to a bit of the back end. So as I say, here's our user group, and I'm going to click over here. Here's our conditional access policy. Now, conditional access policies is something administrators set up. This is not something that end users or managers will look at or even really know about. So system administrators will come in here and configure these in the back end. So if you're a manager and you're sort of looking at that, you need to get with your IT company or your IT support to help you set this back end configuration up. So if I quickly look at this block login conditional access policy we've created, there are a lot of settings in conditional access policy that you can use, but for this task, we've just set a couple. So basically, the first thing we want to do is which users does this conditional access policy apply to? So we can, include no users. We can include all users, which I don't recommend people do because, we're locking people out of the tenant and you do not want to lock all users, including system admins, out. So we want to select specific users or groups. And in our case, we want to select the group that we're adding our SharePoint list to, which is our restricted user system access group. So quite simply, we're including our security group. Next setting, our cloud apps or actions. We're just including all of the cloud applications, which is basically our Microsoft 365 logins. We're not including any conditions. You can set these, like if you wanted to block only, let's say, for example, a specific country. So, you only wanted to block. Let's say you had an overseas call center and you didn't want them logging in, and that call center was run out of India, and you wanted this only to run on that. You could set up a location and only block India at specific times. But in our case, we're just blocking all users that are basically in Australia from what was it, 6 p.m. through to 8 a.m. So we're not accessing any configurations. The next one is the most important. This is the access, this is where we're blocking the access. So we're not worrying about granting any access. We're worried about, we want to block. So we've basically blocked access, and we only require the one, which is the block, and we don't set the session. Now, once you've configured this, you do have the ability to report only. So it's always good once you've set up a conditional access policy, just to test it out, just to test it out in report only to make sure that it does what you think it's going to do, and you're going to save it. So now that we've set up this policy, we're not going to do anything with it because basically the policy is run by our security group, and all we want to do now is put people in and out of the security group. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to bring over a
So this really just reinforces that conditional access is not for beginners, and there's even people have to do certifications really. And as you're learning to do the certifications, you get to learn about things like this conditional access stuff, so that you don't get yourself into trouble, and potentially, and we've seen cases where people have locked themselves completely out of their Microsoft 365 as a result. So it is very powerful stuff, but certainly are not on knowledge and testing and the right way of doing things to actually apply it for this sort of Power Automate interactions that we're seeing right now.
100%. It's and that's why there's the report only, and there's also a what if function, which enables you to sort of put in specific scenarios, specific users, specific IP addresses on where they're logging in from, and it tells you the result. It says this user will have access, this user won't. So basically, as a quick test, what I've got here, I'm just going to sign into the tenant with Diego. Remember, we haven't run any of the flows to put him into the security access. So with the login, it's actually still signing me out. I should have had him signed out rather than signed in. Let's sign Diego back into the tenant. And what I expect to happen here, all going well, if I just get this password here. Diego can log straight into the tenant, no problems at all. Good morning, here we are. Let's go check our emails. So while this is loading up, and here we are, we're logged into our tenant. So I'm just going to sign Diego back out. So what I've also done, coming back here, I've also made it that I can put someone into the list on a button press. So this is a different type of Power Automate. So this runs manually when I want it to. And basically I've done this. You could actually have this if, so for example, let's say someone had resigned unexpectedly, and the company wants managers. They have the ability to lock people out of the tenant straight away. They don't want to go through the process of having to contact the IT company, wait for them to get back from them. Oh yeah, we need you to lock this guy out. Then they allocate a ticket. It goes to a support person, and an hour later the person is locked out. And potentially that's a bit of a risk, on what that ex-employee could do within that hour. So with this button press, you could give this to a manager, and he could instantly put someone into the list, press the button, and they're locked out of the tenant. And on a zero security granted, or zero trust security granted for access, not giving employees access when they don't need access is, of course, another step into the safety of security and management of your tenant. So now let's get into, here we go. So add the list to our SharePoint list with a button press. Now, if I have a quick look at the flow, it's basically exactly the same, but rather than scheduled on a time, it wants me to trigger it. So let me just trigger this flow. Now these flows are quite small, so they run very quickly. They're not doing a lot. Some flows for users and system admins, like if they're a lot longer and that they get into these loops, like this took 3 seconds, but sometimes they can take minutes to run. And in an approval process, a flow may sit there for hours until that approval process is granted. So as you can see, it's got the item, found the user, Diego, and added them to the user group. So if I now come over to the user group and give it a refresh, here we can see Diego has been added into the user group. Now, by doing nothing, we don't have to touch the conditional access policy because it's already in place using this user group. If I now come over to Diego.
So how quickly does the conditional access work once we've done this generally?
It's instant. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up another browser. And the only reason I'm going to open up another browser is that the cookies on that other one can have some memory. So I'm just going to open up an incognito one here. That's important to note that, you know, with an employee potentially leaving and whatever, you do want to get the company devices back as quickly as possible because it can have stuff remembered on it. Log in with Diego here. Stick in the password. And as you can see, the message that is received by the user that the sign-on was successful. So the username and password that I entered in is correct. I'm not being blocked because I got my password wrong, but you don't have permission to access this resource. So our conditional access policy, as you can see, has blocked the sign in. So it's perfect. You know, that's exactly what we wanted. And, you know, you can have a look at more details, which gets a bit technical, but, you know, that can be copied and pasted and sent through to IT support, because a lot of the times when a user sees this for the first time, they don't really understand why or what's going on.
Andrew, just a thought, like at 6 o'clock, this whole list is just going to be simply blocked. So I put the initial requirements in. I don't particularly want someone that's working hard to finish something off to be suddenly just cut off in the middle of doing something. So you've got a process or something to help with that?
There's two things. One is if the user is already logged into the tenant, it won't kick them off. So, you know, if they've been working 2 hours on a Word document, and, you know, it's 6 o'clock, it doesn't kick them off. It doesn't kick them off and whatever. It will allow them to continue working over the 6 p.m. But once they log off the system, they won't be able to log back into the system. The other thing that we've done is, which I get where you're coming from there, Bill, is that a notification. A notification would be the best thing to alert the user. You know, they've been working on their Word document. They're not really, you know, in the headspace. Oh, you know, God, it's coming up to 6 o'clock. So what I did there was, sorry, I just minimized the wrong screen there. What I did was I created another flow that at 5 o'clock, anybody that is in the SharePoint list, let's send them a Teams message. So as you can see here, let me just open this up, and I don't think I showed this before, but here is the reoccurrence of the automation. So once a day, this runs every day at 1700 hours, and it started a couple of days ago. So this has been running. So once again, let's get our SharePoint list and let's post a message in their chat. Just a little message here. Hi, here I am picking up their first name and last name. Please be aware that your access into the system will be revoked in 1 hour. So let me go back. I also created a button press on this one too, where we can just manually run this process. And once again, this will be a very, very, very quick process. So here it goes, picks up our SharePoint lists, loops through each person into the SharePoint list, and sends them a message. Now, when I go back we're not going to try and log back in. I'm actually going to show you guys this. I'm going to need to take Diego out of the security group because, of course, at the moment, he's blocked. So here I've created, removed the list from the group. So this is basically the flow that will run at what was it? It was either 7 or at 7 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so let's run that. Run this flow to remove Diego out of the list. So it's a simple, it's a simple on-off. Put the list in, take the list out, which seems very, very simple, it's great because the Power Platform is giving us this simplicity, but the power of what we're doing is huge. Okay, so as you can see here, that took 2 seconds. Remove Diego from the group. And if I come back over to our user group here and give it a refresh, Diego's been removed from the group. Now, let's log in with Diego again. As you can see, Diego's out of the group. We're logging into the group. Now, if I come across to Diego's teams, what I expect to see after manually running the 5 o'clock flow is basically a new message in Teams. Now you can pick how the user receives this message. I think most companies will be using Microsoft Teams, but if you're not, we could send this message as an email, or potentially you could even send it as a text message. So as you can see up here, Diego's got a new message in his chat. Let me have a look at what that is. Here it is, and there's my message from myself, the administrator, via Power Automate. Hi Diego, please be aware that your access into the system is going to be revoked in 1 hour's time. Kind regards, management. And yeah, so basically that Diego gets that message, and it also reminds him, 6 o'clock's not late enough to be working. Go home and enjoy your evening. So, Yeoman, Bill, you got any questions on what I've just demonstrated there?
Yeah, Andrew, I do. You and I, we go way back with learning about stuff like this, not just Microsoft 365, but even back to the days of the old servers on premises. I mean, you in like me just in shock and awe as how powerful you can put these sorts of things together that were never able to be done into literally the hands of managers to do exactly what they wanted to do without interacting with IT, because I'm just stunned. This is powerful.
Well, I've shown you one thing on blocking users, but within conditional access, you can set up a whole raft of different policies within there. Like I showed before, you can narrow it down to countries. You can narrow it down to IP addresses. You can have it that, so for example, let's say you needed to give an external party admin access, and you didn't have the licensing for privilege management identification. Well, realistically, you could set that up here with a few policies, to give a third party access for 1 hour, and you don't have to be remembering that you've given them that access, because you've set this up where it could just automatically log them off. So yes, the power that it gives you, and the thing that I love is the power that it gives the manager without even having to give him any administrator access into your Microsoft tenant is phenomenal. It's just, it gives him so much power, and the ease in which he does it.
Which probably leads me, if you're almost finished, Andrew, to my question relates exactly to that. There's many different things you could do. And so perhaps your SharePoint list might become a little bit messy. You might want to actually have a database and an app to help manage it rather than forms and a SharePoint list.